The whole town watched when Maury Crane nailed the foreclosure notice to Rosalind Thorne's front door like he was pinning a death sentence to her chest. He did not knock. He did not speak. He drove the iron nail straight into the smooth wood her husband had shaped with his own hands, turned his black horse, and let the sound echo across the frozen street while two women near the well lowered their voices and smiled. It's over for her. 3 children and no man. She was never going to keep that land. Poor widow, she still walks like she owns the place. Rosalind heard every word. She stood in her kitchen with flour on her hands, bread dough under her palms, and that cold sound in her bones. For one long second she did not move. Then she wiped her hands, opened the door, and stared at the notice while the winter wind slapped her face and the whole street pretended not to watch. 60 days. That was all. 60 days until the house, the barn, the land, the well, the last thing Barnabas had built for her and their children belonged to Maury Crane. A man in town laughed under his breath. Somebody whispered, "She'll be begging by spring." Rosalind looked up just once, not at the crowd, at Maury. He sat on his horse like he had already won. Dark coat, clean gloves, eyes too still, too pleased. "March 15th, he said calmly. "Do try not to make this ugly." Then he rode away and left her there with the whole town feeding on her shame. Rosalind pulled the paper free so hard the edge sliced her finger. She did not flinch. She walked back into her kitchen, opened the stove, and fed the notice to the fire. She watched the date blacken, watched the numbers curl, watched the threat turn to ash. Then she closed the stove and went back to kneading bread because if she stopped moving, she would break, and breaking had never once put food on the table. By the time Genevieve came home, the light was already dying behind the mountains. Her 16-year-old daughter stepped inside, took one look at Rosalind's face, then at the fresh bread, then at the stove. "How bad?" she asked. 60 days. Genevieve did not gasp, she did not cry. She simply stood there with that old look in her eyes, the one no child should have. "March 15th, she said. "Yes, we can sell the mare. Then we lose spring planting. We can take in travelers." "In Wyoming in January," Rosalind said quietly. "No one is traveling unless they are desperate." Genevieve swallowed. "Then what do we do?" Rosalind turned back to the loaves. "I will figure it out." Her daughter looked at her for a long moment, the same way Barnabas used to look at broken fences and empty accounts, seeing the truth even when he hated it. Then she took off her coat and said nothing else. Armija came next, quiet, 11 years old, dark hair wet with snow, gentle eyes already learning silence too early. She asked no questions. She simply crossed the room and leaned against Rosalind for 4 seconds exactly, the way she always did when she sensed pain and did not know how to fix it. Ansem came crashing in last with the force of an 8-year-old boy who still believed winter was exciting until adults made it serious. "Jeremiah says a blizzard is coming," he announced. "A real one, bigger than the one in '78. Jeremiah's father says that every winter," Rosalind said, setting bowls on the table. "Hands first. Are the cows going to freeze? No. What if Bess freezes standing up? Then she will be the first horse in history to die looking offended," Rosalind said, and against all reason Armija laughed, a tiny sound she tried to hide. Even Genevieve's mouth moved. Supper passed in that strange way hard families survive, with fear under the table and routine above it. Wind rattled the shutters. Snow began to slash sideways across the yard. By 8 the storm had swallowed the fence, the road, the whole world beyond the windows. Rosalind sent the children to bed. Genevieve stayed behind a little longer, mending in silence. "You going to sleep?" she asked without looking up. "In a while." The needle stopped. "I wish you did not have to do all of this alone." Rosalind looked at her daughter then, really looked, and saw the terrible truth. This child was still 16, but grief had pulled her forward into womanhood with cruel hands. Rosalind gave herself 60 seconds in her room to feel it all. The fear, the loneliness, the crushing weight of being the only wall between her children and disaster. 47 seconds in, the knock came. 3 slow knocks on the front door, not frantic, not drunk, deliberate, wrong. Rosalind was off the bed in a heartbeat. She took Barnabas's shotgun from behind the kitchen door and opened it to a man standing under the storm with snow buried in his shoulders, hat low, hands spread, palms out. He looked like he had been riding through death itself and had only just now decided to stop. "Ma'am," he said, voice rough with cold, I'm not asking for much, just enough shelter to keep from freezing where I stand. I can sleep in your barn." Rosalind kept the shotgun steady and studied him. His coat was worn, his beard gray with ice, his eyes shadowed. But his hands were wrong, too clean in the creases, too untouched by rope, timber, iron, and frost for a man who claimed hard travel. "What is your horse's name?" she asked. He paused, too long. "Nightshade," her grip tightened. Men who lied often lied small first. Still, the storm behind him was real, cruel, merciless. And in his eyes, beneath all that cold, there was something older than fear, something tired in a way she had never seen before. "Second stall," she said finally. "Dry hay, come to the back door when you're done." He tipped his hat once, no smile, no wasted thanks, and vanished back into the blizzard. Rosalind bolted the door after him, but her unease did not leave. It deepened. He called himself Elijah Kane. He sat where she told him to sit. He held his hat in his lap. He accepted soup and bread and barely touched either. He looked late 50s, maybe 60, with gray at the temples and lines around his eyes, but his stillness felt wrong, as if his body remembered another age and had not fully come down from it. "You run this place alone?" he asked. "3 children and me. Your husband, gone." He nodded like that word meant more to him than most men would understand. Ansem appeared in the doorway in his nightshirt, squinting at the stranger without fear. "There's a hole in the north side of the barn," he said. "Wind cuts right through. Don't sleep too near Bess. She kicks in her sleep." Something moved across the man's face then, fast, controlled, gone. "Much obliged," he said, and he said it like he meant it. Later, after he went back out with blankets and a lamp, Rosalind stood at the kitchen window and watched that square of yellow light flicker in the barn. Genevieve stood in the hallway behind her. "Who is he?" "A traveler." "No," Genevieve said quietly. "I mean, who is he really?" Rosalind did not answer because she did not know, and because that was what frightened her. The light stayed on far into the night, too long, longer than any ordinary man would stay awake after a ride through a storm. Rosalind was still watching when she heard a soft voice at her side. "Armija." "Mama," she whispered, eyes fixed on the barn. "The man in there, he isn't like other people." Rosalind looked down sharply. "What do you mean?" Armija swallowed. "When the light touched him before, his shadow was wrong." A chill moved through Rosalind, colder than the storm outside. "Wrong how?" "Like it didn't belong to his body," Armija whispered. "And when I looked very hard, I could almost see through him." Rosalind turned back to the barn window. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. Outside, the wind screamed over the land like a warning. Inside, the widow who had just burned her last notice understood something with slow, terrible certainty. The stranger she had taken in from the storm was not just a tired man. He was a secret, a dangerous one, and somewhere deep in her bones, something was already telling her that the foreclosure notice, the blizzard, and Elijah Kane's arrival at her door on the worst night of winter were not separate miseries at all. They were the beginning of the same nightmare. The blizzard held for 3 days, and by the end of the first, Rosalind knew 2 things with certainty. The man in her barn did not sleep, and he did not eat like an ordinary man. Every plate she left came back barely touched. Every time she looked through the kitchen window in the dead of night, the lamp was still burning in the barn, as if darkness did not trouble him at all. By the second morning, the woodpile had doubled. Not grown, doubled. Impossible work for one man, especially in that cold. He had cleared the path from house to barn, mucked the stalls, repaired a hinge, stacked feed, and split more timber before dawn than Barnabas and a hired hand could manage in a full day. "He is strange," Genevieve said in a low voice as they cleared dishes. "His hands are too smooth, his speech is too careful, and he watches everything." Armija looked up from her schoolwork. "He is sad," she said simply. Genevieve gave her a sharp look. "You do not know that." "I do," Armija said, with the unnerving, quiet certainty that made adults stop talking. "He feels very old and very tired." Rosalind said nothing, but she had felt it too. On the third morning, when the sky finally cleared to a hard blue and the storm broke, she carried coffee outside and stopped dead at the sight of the yard. He had done more work before sunrise, so much more that the whole scene looked wrong, like time itself had bent around him. Elijah Kane stood by the chopping block with the axe in one hand, coat open despite the cold, as if winter had less hold on him than it did on other men. "Morning," he said. Rosalind held out the cup. His fingers brushed hers for a moment and she nearly pulled back. His skin was not winter cold, it was deeper than that. Stone cold, earth cold, dead cold. "How much wood to get you through February?" he asked. She told him. He nodded once. "I'll have it done by nightfall." "You do not need to prove anything," she said. He looked at her strangely then, almost startled. "I'm not trying to prove anything, ma'am. I'm trying to be useful." "Why?" The question came before she could stop it. He turned the cup slowly in his hands. "Because for a very long time," he said quietly, "I forgot what it felt like." Before Rosalind could answer, Ansem burst out of the house asking if he could help. Elijah, if that was even his name, lowered himself to the boy's height and listened as Ansem explained how to read grain in wood and where to strike so the axe would not stick. He listened with real attention, not polite attention, not grown man indulgence. Attention. Rosalind watched from the window a little later and saw her son glowing with pride while the stranger split wood exactly where he had been told. Whoever he was dangerous in one way already. He was becoming easy to like. That same day, Armija went to the barn alone. She did not enter. She stood in the doorway and stared in. When she came back, her face was pale. "Mama," she whispered, "he is not all the way here." Rosalind's hand stilled in the dishwater. "What did you see?" "The sun came through the boards," Armija said, voice shaking now. "And his shadow did not move right. And when the light crossed his arm, I could see through it, just a little." Rosalind's pulse kicked hard. The back door opened before she could speak further. Elijah entered with Ansem. Armija went silent immediately, but her eyes stayed on him. He did not look at her, not once. That was almost worse. Breakfast passed tense and thin. Ansem chattered. Genevieve watched. Armija barely touched her food. Elijah moved food around the plate without really eating. When he rose to leave, Rosalind said quietly, "What are you?" The room froze. He looked at her, then at Armija, then back at Rosalind. "I'm a man trying to remember what it means to be human," he said. "That is not an answer." "No," he said after a beat. "It is." He went out into the cold, and for the first time in 3 years Rosalind did something she had promised herself never to do again. She opened Barnabas's trunk. At the bottom, under his good shirt and the Bible from his mother, she found the journal he had hidden from her. Her hands shook as she turned to the final entries. There it was in his own writing. "There are things in this world that wear human faces but are not human. I have seen signs near the old church ruins. This land is not simply land. It is protected ground, sacred ground, and some debts are not what they appear to be." Rosalind went cold all over. She closed the journal and looked toward the barn window where the lamp burned again in full dark. By dawn she had made up her mind. She found him in the barn before sunrise. "You knew," he said softly when he saw the journal in her hands. "My husband knew something," Rosalind said, stepping closer. "Now you tell me everything. No lies, no half-truths. What are you?" The silence stretched. Then the stranger straightened, and when he did, something in him changed. The borrowed weariness remained, but beneath it came something else. Command, weight, authority so old and natural it made the whole barn feel smaller. "My name is not Elijah Kane," he said. "It is Alaric Blackwood." The name hit like iron. "And 800 years ago I became something that should not still be walking this earth." Rosalind stared. He looked directly at her and the mask finally fell. "I am a vampire." The word should have driven her running. It should have sent her screaming for her children. Instead she stood there, frozen not by fear alone but by the impossible shape of the truth. The man who had split her wood, listened to her son, carried sorrow in his eyes, and slept in her barn was a creature out of old nightmares. "Why are you here?" she whispered. Alaric looked at his hands. "I came west looking for something real. I have spent centuries buried in wealth, power, politics, blood, and lies. I was tired of all of it. I did not know your family, I did not know this land, but then I discovered something in town 3 days ago." He lifted his eyes to hers. "The debt Maury Crane is collecting from you belongs to me." For a second Rosalind did not understand. Then the floor seemed to shift beneath her. "What?" "A holding company, old investments, territory loans bundled by lawyers and advisors. I signed papers years ago without reading every name. Your husband's loan was one of them." Rosalind stepped back as if struck. "You own my debt, yes. And you sat at my table, ate my bread, let me speak of losing my home while you already held the knife." "No," his voice sharpened. I did not know until after I arrived, and once I did not know what kind of man I was allowed to be about it. The old one who solved everything with power, or, he stopped. Or what? Rosalind demanded. Or the one your children made me want to become. She stared at him, horrified at herself for understanding what he meant. Can you clear it? Yes. Then do it. Is that what you truly want? She almost slapped him for that. You think I am proud enough to lose my children's home? I think, he said quietly, moving a step closer, that you have survived 3 years by your own hands and you cannot bear the idea of this place being saved by the guilt of a creature you do not trust. The truth landed hard because it was true. Rosalind hated him for seeing it, hated herself more for being seen. She swallowed against the heat in her throat. My husband wrote that some debts are not what they appear to be, she said. What did he mean? Alaric's face darkened. I think he learned what Moray Crane truly is. A banker. No, Alaric said. A vampire, ancient, patient, worse than most kings I have known. 200 years ago he was my general. Rosalind's blood turned to ice. Your what? My general, my right hand. I banished him after he slaughtered a village of humans to prove a point. He believed fear was more useful than mercy. He still does. Rosalind could barely breathe now. Alaric went on, voice lower. Your land sits on sanctuary ground. Sacred earth vampires cannot seize by force, only through willing transfer, through law, through debt, through foreclosure. The pieces slammed together. Barnabas, the loan, the pressure, Moray's smile. He gave Barnabas the loan to take the land, she whispered. Yes. Why? Alaric looked toward the east, toward the old church ruins. Because with the right ritual performed on the right night, sanctuary ground can be corrupted into something else. A gate, a wound in the world, a place where darkness spreads unchecked. Rosalind's hands went numb. And what does he need for that? Alaric's jaw tightened. The blood of a vampire king and the sacrifice of an innocent child who carries the sight. Rosalind went still. Then she did the numbers with a mother's terror, too fast and too clear. Armisia. Yes. The word nearly broke her. No. The next new moon, Alaric said. February 20th, 23 days. Rosalind spun away, then back, wild with rage. You are telling me some ancient monster planned to murder my daughter through a debt he built around my family. Yes. And you expect me to stand here calmly? No, Alaric said, and when he spoke now the barn shook with command. I expect you to let me help you stop him. Why should I trust you? You are one of them. I am the only thing in this territory old enough, cruel enough, and strong enough to kill him. Rosalind stared at him. There was no softness left in his face, no traveler, no drifter, no borrowed man. This was a king, dangerous, ancient, terrible. Why would you help us? She demanded. Alaric's eyes darkened with something close to shame. Because 800 years ago I performed the first eternal night ritual myself. The barn went silent around them. I buried a kingdom in darkness. Thousands died. I broke it too late. More I saw it, learned from it, worshipped it. I banished him for wanting to recreate it. And now he is here, at your door, trying to use your child to finish what my own sins began. Rosalind backed into a hay bale and sat because her knees would not hold. What do we do? She whispered. Before Alaric could answer, Genevieve's voice cut across the yard like a blade. Mama, someone is coming. They ran outside together. Moray Crane rode up the road on his black horse with the calm, elegant confidence of a man who believed the world had already agreed to belong to him. His eyes swept the porch, Rosalind, Genevieve, then the yard where Alaric stopped half-shadowed between barn and house. Recognition flashed, satisfaction followed. Mrs. Thorne, Moray said smoothly, I thought I should check on my investment. Rosalind stepped forward before fear could root her. The debt will be paid, Moray smiled without warmth. Will it? His gaze slid to Alaric. You have taken help, how seasonal of you. Then his eyes landed on Genevieve a second too long. Such a lovely family. I would hate to see it scattered. When he finally rode away, the threat stayed behind like poison in the air. Rosalind stood on the porch shaking, not from cold now, but from a fury so deep it tasted like iron. This was no longer a debt, no longer a widow's private disaster. This was a hunt, and her daughter was the prey. When Rosalind gathered the children in the kitchen and told them the truth, the world did not end with screams the way she feared. It broke in quieter ways. Genevieve rose so fast her chair crashed backward. No, her face had gone white with rage. She looked at Alaric standing in the corner and her voice shook as she pointed at him. "You are a monster. He is a monster. Papa knew about monsters, and now we are meant to trust one of them to save us." "I do not ask for trust," Alaric said. "I ask for the chance to fight on your side." "That is worse," Genevieve snapped. "Manipulation sounds holy when men say it softly." Rosalind started to speak, but Genevieve had already turned toward Barnabas's trunk with fury in every step. "I'm going to find what Papa left us," she said, "and if there is any way to kill that banker, I will use it." She vanished up the hallway. Ansem sat stiff and silent, trying to be brave enough not to cry. Armisia only looked at Alaric with those terrible knowing eyes. "Are you going to hurt us?" she asked. "No," he said at once. "Are you going to hurt the bad man?" Alaric's face hardened. "Yes," Armisia nodded once. "Good." That nearly undid Rosalind more than anything else. 3 hours later, Genevieve came down carrying a small hidden box from the false bottom of Barnabas's trunk. Inside lay a silver knife, a vial of clear water, and a sealed letter. Barnabas's own hand wrote the truth. His family line had been hunters once. The daughters carried the gift: sanctuary ground, sacred spring water. Moray Crane was not human. If darkness came, trust the one willing to stand against it, even if he came from darkness himself. Genevieve's hands shook as she finished reading. She picked up the silver knife and the blade glowed faintly like cold moonlight. Everyone saw it. Everyone understood. "I felt it," Genevieve whispered. "The moment he arrived, I knew something in him was wrong." Alaric nodded. "Hunter blood." Her eyes lifted to him, hard. "Can this kill Moray? If you are fast, if you are close enough. If you do not hesitate." "I won't." Rosalind stepped in immediately. "You are 16. Genevieve faced her mother then with tears and fire mixed together. "And I am his daughter too. Do not ask me to sit still while they come for my sister." That was the moment the family changed. Fear stopped being only fear. It became purpose. The days until the new moon moved like sharpened wire. Before dawn every morning, Alaric trained Genevieve in the yard while frost clung to the ground and the mountains still slept in blue dark. He taught her that strength meant nothing if fear on the first second. He taught her to watch the eyes because intention moved there before the body followed. He taught her that vampires were fast, but pride made them careless. "You do not fight for yourself," he told her while she held the glowing knife with both hands. "You fight for the people behind you. If you fight for yourself, fear will find you. If you fight for them, there is no room left for fear." Rosalind heard that through the kitchen window and understood why this impossible creature had entered her life. He was dangerous, yes, terrible, yes, but he was not lying about one thing. He had chosen them. Ansem begged to learn too. Alaric taught him what a child could safely know: how to carry silver bullets, how to lay sacred water lines across thresholds, how to watch roads, how not to panic. Armisia stayed close to Rosalind, quiet and pale. Sometimes she said strange things under her breath, like someone hearing music no one else could hear. "The land is waking," she whispered once as they baked bread. "It knows something is coming." Late one night, Rosalind found Alaric in the barn painting ancient symbols with sacred spring water into the walls, making a sanctuary within the sanctuary. The moon was thinning above them. The deadline was close enough now to taste. "Do you regret coming here?" she asked. He turned to her, lamplight catching the old sorrow in his face. "No, even knowing what it will cost, especially knowing." She stepped closer. "What does that mean?" For a long moment he did not answer. Then he said the one thing she had not prepared herself to hear. "My old council has found me. They have demanded I return by the new moon and take back my throne. If I refuse, I will be declared traitor and hunted." Rosalind stared at him. "What will you choose?" He looked at her with centuries in his eyes and a tenderness that still startled her every time it appeared. "I have spent 800 years being a king," he said quietly. "I think it is time I learned how to be a man." Her breath caught. "Even if it costs you immortality, especially then." That was when she understood the full shape of what stood before her. This was not just a vampire fighting another vampire. This was a king walking away from eternity, a monster choosing mortality. A creature built for darkness choosing a house, a woman, 3 children, and a hard life under a mortal sun. When he finally told her he loved her, it did not feel sudden. It felt inevitable. "I love your strength," he said in the barn, voice rough with honesty. I love the way you burn the notice instead of letting him see fear. I love the way your son talks as if every thought matters. I love the way Armisia sees what no one else does. I love Genevieve's rage because it rises from love, not vanity. And I love you, Rosalind. I love that after 3 years of grief you still made bread. I love that you gave shelter to a stranger before you knew whether he deserved it. Rosalind kissed him before he could say another word. It was not soft at first. It was desperate, furious, full of grief, hunger, loneliness, and that dangerous hope widows do not permit themselves. When they parted, he held her as if she were breakable. I have never felt anything like this, he whispered. Neither have I, she said, and both of them knew the cost of that truth. The new moon rose on February 20th, 1887. Rosalind woke with dread in her blood and fire in her chest. She made breakfast and memorized her children's faces while they ate. Genevieve looked fierce with the silver knife hidden at her belt. Ansem tried to sit like a man and failed because he was still only 8. Armisia clung close, pale but steady. Alaric came in from the barn before sunset looking harder than Rosalind had ever seen him. The softness was gone. The king remained. They are coming, he said, Morai and 3 of his inner circle. Rosalind sent the children to the sanctuary room in the barn with Genevieve in charge. Do not come out unless I come for you, she said. The last look Ansem gave her nearly split her in two. Then the barn door shut. Sunset touched the mountains. Morai Crane rode into the yard with 3 ancient vampires and stopped at the property line where Sanctuary still held them back. Mrs. Thorne, he called smoothly, give me the child and I will erase the debt. Go to hell, Rosalind shouted back, his smile thinned. At midnight these protections fall, then your choices end. He looked to Alaric, old friend, still pretending love is stronger than hunger. I am done pretending, Alaric said. Then reclaim your throne and stand with me. No. Then die with them. The air shook, the boundary shuddered, tiny cracks rippled through the unseen protection. Rosalind looked at Alaric in panic. He looked back with terrible calm. There is one way, he said, an old law older than Morai. A vampire king may surrender immortality to save an innocent life. It gives 60 seconds of absolute power, then it makes him human. Rosalind went still. No, if I wait, he wins. There has to be another way. There is not. He cupped her face with both hands. I need you to trust me one last time. Tears flooded her eyes. You planned this. From the moment I learned what he wanted from your daughter, she kissed him hard enough to hurt. Come back to me, she whispered. I will, he said, and turned toward the boundary. Then the ancient words began. The ground trembled. The air flashed. Morai's eyes widened in horror. You would not dare. Watch me, Alaric said, and the light exploded out of him. Pure white, violent, final. When Rosalind could see again, he was no longer merely the man from her barn. He was the full ruin and glory of a vampire king burning through 800 years in one last act of will. He crossed the boundary like it was nothing. The first vampire turned to ash in his grip. The second died before his feet hit the ground. The third raised a blade and lost both blade and body in the same breath. Morai backed away at last, fear cracking his smooth face. You fool, he snarled. You give up eternity for mortals who will die and leave you alone again. Alaric seized him by the chest. I would rather die loved than rule unloved forever. Morai began to burn from the inside. Ash burst from his mouth, but even dying he smiled. Too late, he gasped. The ritual has already begun. Rosalind's heart stopped. She ran for the sanctuary room. The door hung open. Genevieve was unconscious on the floor, blood at her temple. Ansem was bound and gagged, shaking with terror. Armisia was gone. Rosalind screamed her daughter's name so hard it tore her throat raw. Alaric staggered in behind her. The light around him was already dying. His skin cracked like old porcelain as mortality rushed in. Church ruins, he forced out. The ritual is there. Then he collapsed. Rosalind dropped beside him. His face was changing even as she watched. Softer, human, fragile. Stay with me, she begged. You must go, he whispered, barely conscious now. Sacred blood on sacred ground breaks corruption. Your blood, Barnabas's line lives through you. Stop the ritual. Genevieve woke just enough to understand. Rosalind pressed the silver knife into her hand and kissed her forehead. Protect him. Protect your brother. Then Rosalind ran. She ran across frozen land under a dead moon toward the old church ruins where black magic tore at the sky. Armisia lay bound on a stone altar, blood already on the carved symbols, eyes wide with terror. Moray was dead, but the ritual he began was feeding on itself now, wild and broken and hungry. Rosalind climbed the altar and cut her daughter free. "I've got you," she whispered. "I've got you." Then she saw the spiraling darkness and understood. This ground had been poisoned. It had to be claimed back. She cut her own palm with the silver knife and let her blood fall on the stone. "I claim this land," she said, voice shaking but strong. "In the name of my husband who died for it. In the name of my children who will live on it, in the name of home, in the name of family, in the name of love that does not kneel to darkness." The altar erupted with white light. The corruption shattered. The symbols cracked. The air screamed. Then silence. Pure, clean, holy silence. Dawn was touching the mountains by the time Rosalind reached the house again with Armisia in her arms. Genevieve met her at the door, white-faced and fierce. "He's alive," she whispered. Rosalind ran to her bedroom. Alaric lay on her bed, breathing slowly, face older now, lines deeper, skin warm for the first time, warm, human, mortal. His eyes opened when she entered. "Did you stop it?" "Yes." Tears spilled down his face and hers together. "Then it was worth it," he said. Rosalind took his hand and pressed it to her face. "No," she whispered. "It was more than worth it. It was everything." They married in the spring. Simple, quiet, real. Genevieve stood beside them with her father's silver knife at her belt and a look that said she would kill heaven itself before letting darkness touch her family again. Armisia scattered wildflowers. Ansem carried the rings with both hands as if holding the future. 5 years passed. The debt vanished with Moray's empire. The land stayed theirs. Genevieve became a hunter. Armisia became keeper of stories. Ansem grew tall under the sky Barnabas once loved. And Alaric Blackwood, who had ruled for 8 centuries, learned the beauty of growing older one real day at a time. Gray in his hair, lines by his eyes, calluses on his hands, mortal, loved, home at last. One evening on the porch, Rosalind asked him the question no one else would dare ask. "Do you regret giving up eternity?" He looked over their land, their children, the sunset sinking gold over sanctuary ground, then back at her. "Not for 1 second." He touched her face with human hands. "Power lasts, fear lasts, empires last, but none of them mean anything if they are empty. Love does not last forever either. That is exactly why it matters more." Rosalind leaned into him and thought of the notice burning in her stove, of the storm, of the knock at her door, of the monster who arrived asking for shelter and became the man who saved her child by giving up forever. Some people would call that madness. Some would call it sin. Some would say she betrayed the memory of her dead husband by loving again, and worse, by loving a creature her husband once feared. Maybe they would never understand. Maybe love after grief always looks like betrayal to people who have never had to crawl out of the dark. But standing there with her mortal husband's arms around her, land safe beneath her feet, children alive under her roof, Rosalind knew one thing with terrible clarity. The line between monster and hero is not what a creature is. It is what that creature chooses when love costs everything. If you stayed till the end, comment, "Love over power." And tell me this, if the only person who could save your family was a monster with blood on his hands, would you trust him? Or would you let the darkness win?